The greatest act of terrorism in the world since 9/11/2001 took place last week. The fact that it's already disappeared into the memory hole and is not the biggest journalistic story in the world today is scarcely a journalistic story in the world today, is proof positive that Joe Biden was the terrorist.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
With regard to Nord Stream 2, we continue to have very strong and clear conversations with our German allies, and I want to be clear with you today. If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward.
The blowing up of two pipelines, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, released into the atmosphere enough methane to power the entire industrialized economy for an entire year, and the greenery is nowhere to be found denouncing it. Russia was robbed of between $600 and $800 million worth of gas that is now bubbling in the sea. And none of those who say they care about a rules-based order, about the rule of law, are anywhere to be found. Germany's economy was just murdered in a terrorist act, and no one can be found to denounce it. This act of terrorism, international state terrorism, ought to be the major story in the world's media, but has disappeared from the world's media. They spent a day or two trying to claim that Russia blew up its own pipeline, blew its own $800 million, deprived itself of the leverage of being able to switch on, switch off the supply of gas to Europe, but only someone wrapped up in a straitjacket in Ward 5 of Broadmoor Hospital for the criminally insane could possibly believe that. And Joe Biden, no pun intended, gave the lamest of non-denial denials after his press conference in the week. Truth is, everybody now knows the Americans carried out this act of terrorism, but it was not an act of terrorism against Russia, which has got plenty of customers for its gas. It was an act of terrorism against you, against Europe, against the European people and their economy, and from which they may never recover. They may spend now decades lashed to the super expensive, environmentally far dirtier liquid natural gas coming from the United States, for which you have to build new ports, new containers, new areas to receive the tankers that come in with that gas. And having got you over that barrel, having hooked you to their monopoly, just you wait and see what happens to the prices. We'll be talking to a considerable expert, George Samuelis, about all of this later in the show. But the fact that Ukraine is now invading Russia rather than the other way about, and don't tell me that the people of these regions had no right to declare themselves independent. The Scottish nationalists are trying to do that right now. The British state in 2014, when it gave them a referendum, if that referendum had gone the other way, Scotland would have been separate. would have been an independent state. Kosovo didn't even have a referendum and was ripped out of Serbia and granted international recognition. It's now a NATO protectorate without a vote having been cast either in Kosovo or in Serbia, whose country it was. And they're now playing in the international football. I see they were in the Nations League this week. Kosovo's not a country. Kosovo is a province of somebody else's country. So how come Kosovans have got a right to self-determination, to leave Serbia, but the people of the Donbass don't have the right, in a referendum, impeccably carried out, in front of any camera that turned up there, doesn't have the right to leave the Ukraine? It's perfectly absurd, of course. And then I could talk about the Golan Heights illegally annexed by Israel. I could talk about East Jerusalem illegally seized and turned into Israeli territory with the wave of a wand and recognized by the United States. I could go on, but I have run out of time. But I shall return with my guests to all of these issues, because this truly is the mother of all tortures.
Today, we are also dealing with an act of sabotage. We do not know the details of what happened yet, but we can clearly see that it is an act of sabotage, an act that probably marks the next stage in the escalation of the situation we are dealing with in Ukraine.